Welcome back to the Kingfisher podcast with Eric and Bron Whitley. Thanks for joining us once again as we discuss life, faith, and ministry.
Yeah, today we're going to be talking about church-related issues. And I know if you're a Christian, then you are most likely part of a church and you've probably encountered issues.
Well, I hope you're a part of the church if you're a Christian. I mean, that's kind of an important
It's a big
thing.
part of being a Christian.
We're very much proponents of being a part of a congregation.
Yeah.
And the Bible tells us, we need to do that. We
Do not give up meeting together.
That's it. We really need to do that. And unfortunately, church is made of people.
It is. They kind of ruin it.
I mean, pastors often joke.
It'd be perfect otherwise.
Yeah, pastors often joke, if it weren't for the people, man, this job would be great.
And we're joking, of course, because people are what church is all about. But it's one of those things that, nobody's perfect. Even when you're a Christian, you're not perfect. And we have to stop expecting everyone to be perfect.
Oh, totally. And when it doesn't matter what group of people you're involved with, whether it's, for me, if it's the baseball club, if it's church, if it's at school, if it's at work, whenever humans gather together in one place, at some point, there's going to be conflict, there's going to be hurt, there's going to be offense. And as Christians, the Bible is really clear that we have a process and a way that we're supposed to handle that and do it appropriately, that oftentimes we don't always respond that way. We kind of do what the world does and respond because that's what's a natural instinct for us. You hurt me, I'm going to hurt you.
So in the world, if you're going to a soccer club or something and somebody hurts you at the soccer club, you might get upset and angry, but it's not like you have to really talk to that person again, and you could just avoid them. You have no obligation to them or anything like that. And so people just tend to avoid each other or, leave that club, go to a different one or whatever. Or if it's work related, they might talk to the boss about it, or they might leave that workplace. But there's a lot of, jostling and avoiding and all that sort of stuff. But when you're in a family, you can't just avoid the person. You're related to them. You're a part of the family for life. And church is a little bit like that. It's you don't have to be part of a church for life necessarily, but a lot of people will be. And it is like a family though. You can't just go to church and avoid and ignore certain people because you have had a falling out with them. I know people do that, but we're called to love one another. That's what the Bible says over and over, love one another. Well, when it says that, it's referring to Christians. It's referring to us as Christians loving each other as Christians. And we're supposed to be like a family who love one another, who spend time together, fellowship together, worship God together. And so when we have conflict, it becomes a lot more tricky. And I think it's a lot more personal for people.
It is. And I know family, from many years of doing ministry with people, family can be a triggering word because families are very dysfunctional. And I've never met anyone from a family that is not dysfunctional.
In some way.
In some way.
Yeah.
It's just your crazy looks a little different to mine.
Yeah, and you might be able to healthily manage that dysfunction in some ways, but there is always going to be some level of dysfunction.
Yeah, there's going to be dysfunction, and there's different degrees of dysfunction, of course, and hurt. But when we say family, if it's triggering to you, I don't want you to turn off and switch off right now. Family is actually a good thing. It's God's idea. He came up with this concept of family, and he uses that as a metaphor for what the body of Christ, the church, is supposed to look like, that we are brothers and sisters in Christ. There are some churches that they call each other brother. I know growing up, we called our pastors Brother Ralph and Brother Randy, and, that was their name, that was their title. Whereas, in my experience, I've been called Pastor Eric and that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But we called him brother. And I know some people refer to each other in that way, like brother and sister. And we need to take back, I guess, that term so that it's one that's positive. That, yes, you know what? We've got 3 kids. They're siblings. They're brother and sisters. And they fight sometimes.
Yeah.
Sometimes they are lovely together, and I'm sure they have some wonderful memories of their childhood, and we hope that they'll build more as they get older. But yeah, there are times of conflict because you spend time with anybody for very long. You're probably going to disagree, or you're going to say something wrong, or they're going to say something wrong, or do something you don't like, or whatever.
And there's different personality types. There are different viewpoints. There are different styles of families that people have come from. So there are different ways of communicating, or, it's amazing when you see how diverse the church is and people coming from all these different backgrounds and all these different worldviews, and then they're coming together as a family.
Well, and that's what I was going to say is in a church, we're all bringing our own individual, unique and special dysfunction to one place.
Yeah.
We're all doing that. It's okay because that's supposed to be a place where we can learn and grow. The Bible talks about iron sharpening iron, and we're supposed to be there to rub those rough edges of each other and help them to smooth out.
And it takes humility to receive that.
It does take humility to receive.
If I have a rough edge and somebody exposes that, which has happened at church to me, I know, shock horror that I might have rough edges, but
it's news to me.
But I have had those exposed at church, and it takes humility to go, okay, that really hurt. What just happened really hurt. I was offended. I was wounded. I was hurt by what those people said. But then I go home and then I spend time with God, and I'm like, okay, it's exposed something in me that I need to deal with. That was not entirely on them. And, it's hard to admit that. It's hard to admit they did hurt me, but I played a role in this, and they exposed the rough edges, and I need to work on that. I need to change that, and I need to pray about it and repent, forgive, those sorts of things.
As much as I hate to say it, they were right, and maybe the delivery or the message was not done in the best way, but the words and the truth of it were right. And
or even if they weren't right, it could just be, why did I overreact to that? Why did I respond in that way? It wasn't such a big deal, or why am I allowing them to get under my skin so much?
Yeah, exposing that rawness that's underneath. Yeah. Well, when we are a part of a church, it's inevitable at some point we are going to be offended. Now, how we respond is the important part.
Yeah.
We cannot control the actions or words or attitudes of others, but we can control ourselves. You've probably all heard someone say something of that nature many times
to our kids
in your life.
Yeah.
You can't control them, but you can control you. So as a Christian, what is our responsibility? What is the proper response when we're offended, when we're hurt, when things don't go the way that we maybe expected them to? We have an expectation that church and family are going to look and act a certain way, and then when they don't, how do we respond?
Well, let me read to you from Matthew 5, verse 23 onwards. It says, "Therefore, if you are offering your gift at the altar, and there remember that your brother or sister has something against you, leave your gift there in front of the altar. First go and be reconciled to them, then come and offer your gift. Settle matters quickly with your adversary who is taking you to court. Do it while you are still together on the way, or your adversary may hand you over to the judge, and the judge may hand you over to the officer, and you may be thrown in prison." So, obviously that last part is about a different situation, but it's the same kind of concept of handle matters quickly. Don't let them just fester.
Well, I'm glad you brought that verse up because I'm going to talk about Matthew 18 after this. But that's from the perspective of, I know I have done something or said something to someone and they've got something against me because I've acted in a way. So how can I go and resolve that? Now, we pretty much know when we have hurt someone. There are obviously times where inadvertently, non-consciously, we've done something that's hurt somebody.
Yeah,
there was no intention behind it, and it just happens, okay? But when we do something, we often know we've hurt somebody's feelings.
Yeah.
And so from that perspective, it's saying, okay, if you've done that, you need to go and seek recompense. You need to go and seek a way to make it right with that person. So that puts it on the offender. And as Christians, see, this is the thing. God's standard is high. It puts it on the offender to go and make it right instead of waiting on the offended to forgive and whatever else.
Yeah, for sure. And as Christians, that's what we're supposed to do. We shouldn't be allowing those things to fester. We should be keeping short accounts. We should be in touch with God about, what have I done? What do I need to repent of? Who do I need to forgive? If we're coming to the altar or we're having that time with God in church where maybe we're receiving communion, those are the times where you need to sit and go, okay, what do I need to deal with? What are some of the issues that are blocking me from in my relationship with God or others? Lord, let's deal with these accounts that we've got.
Well, I know often in our relationship, I can be a fiery person, and sometimes I say things I don't mean, or I exaggerate the point I'm trying to make. And I often will go away and think about it and go, okay, that was too much, and I shouldn't have said it that way, or I was too angry, whatever. And I usually come back and try to apologize and say, I'm really sorry, that was wrong. It takes a big person to do that, and not everybody will do that. So this is where I think Matthew 18 comes in. So if you're not familiar with that passage, it's all about what do you do when you've been offended, when you've been hurt by someone? What is the process, the proper process? Because there's a lot of responses that happen. One of the common ones is somebody hurts us and we go around talking about it and tell everybody who will listen.
I've definitely done this.
about how bad that other person is.
Yeah, because you want to get everyone on your side to say, yes, they did you wrong. You are absolutely in the right.
That's exactly it. You're looking for this affirmation of you are the victim and they're the baddie. And all that does is vilify the other person.
Yeah.
It's not a helpful thing, and it creates disunity because you're creating sides. It's us against them.
Yeah.
And in a church, this happens so frequently. And
yeah,
it's
for sure.
really, really bad. And it can have disastrous consequences.
Also, when you're telling your side of the story, it's just your side of the story. It's not both sides. And so you're not sharing a fair view of what happened.
No. And we all have a biased perspective towards ourselves.
Yeah. I caught myself doing this the other day where something had happened and I was speaking to others about it and going, this is not right. This isn't fair that this happened. And I thought to myself, I'm not seeing the whole picture here. I'm not sharing the entire perspective of everything that's happened or all of the elements that are involved. And I'm being unfair to that person. And what I really need to do is spend some time with God and forgive them for what they said and did.
Yeah. So in Matthew 18, the process starts out, we need to go privately to that person. So, Bron, you've hurt my feelings. I need to talk to you about that. And I do that in a private setting where it's not involving anybody else.
Gosh, that's a hard thing to do.
And share.
I have to say, that's a really hard thing to do.
I don't know if it is or not. I feel like it's best to just go back to that person and go, look, I still disagree with you, but what you said hurt my feelings or whatever. I just want to let you know that. But in that, the whole point of that is not to go and point out their error. It's to go and seek reconciliation with them so that you can forgive and they can apologize if they want to, whatever. But the whole point is to bring reconciliation.
Yeah, I guess it really does matter how you go about it, because when I picture it in my mind in this particular situation, I feel like it would just spark more conflict going to them and talking about it. So you're right, you would have to go in without trying to just point out to them all the things they did wrong, because all they're going to do then is defend themselves.
Yes.
And then that will just cause more conflict and hurt.
Well, I recently, because I coach baseball, had an issue with one of the boys and their behavior during a game. And so I had to go to the parents and talk about it because they were going to be punished for their actions. And that's exactly the response I got. They arced up and got really defensive and whatever else. And I had to just sort of calm it down and say, look, I'm not having a go at you. For you that are not in Australia, that means I'm not coming at you and
telling you off.
So I'm not having a go at you, mate. But we do have to talk about this because this is an issue. So I'm just letting you know these are the things that are happening. And, they immediately calmed down. And then they sort of turned around and went, oh, okay, yeah, I'm sorry. And, they apologized to me and all of that. They responded in a bad way. And these are non-Christian people. These aren't people who know God or know any of this stuff.
Yeah.
So,
but it's a normal human reaction if someone comes to you and says, you did this, you did this, you did this, and they're only sharing that 1% biased side and perspective. They don't know how you were feeling. It's a very normal reaction to go, well, hang on and defend yourself.
Yeah.
And we have to keep that in mind. I know there's sort of therapy speak where you can say, when you did this, it made me feel blah, blah, blah. And because that helps people, the person you're speaking to, you sort of get an insight into how their words impacted you or their actions impacted you, and helps them to maybe feel a little bit of empathy with your situation. And I think just changing our language and the way we approach people is really important. But that reconciliation is such at the heart of God's desire for us as a church.
Yeah, he wants us to be unified. And I think the point you bring up, the words that we use, and I think the agenda that we come with, if our point is to restore relationship through love, we're not going to come in and go, well, you said this and you did that.
Yeah, if your agenda is just to show them what a bad person they are.
Yeah.
that's not going to help.
That's not going to work. So the agenda has to be, look, I care about you and I care about our relationship, but this hurt me, and can we talk about this? That's what that means.
And you know what that takes? It takes seeing them as a whole person, not just a caricature or not just a baddie. You know, what we tend to do in this modern society is if somebody hurts us or says something that offends us, we put them in a box labeled baddie while we're in the box labeled goodie, and we tend to dismiss them completely. So we're not going to be able to go to them in humility and say, I love you and care about you as a whole person, but what you said on this occasion hurt me, because we see them as a bad person. We don't love them. And so what we have to do, we have to reject that. That's a teaching of the world. We have to reject that teaching of the world. That's not godly. We don't label people as bad because they have done something that is hurtful or offensive or mean, or even just disagrees with you. And we have to see them as a complete whole person who does things that are bad, just like we do.
Oh, exactly. Well, to put my sort of prayer minister hat on, I would call that ungodly judgment. And that is something that usually goes hand in hand with unforgiveness, is we ungodly judge somebody for their actions. It's human nature. We tend to judge people based on their words and actions, but then if we are doing the same thing, we judge ourselves on our motives. And the reason for that is I know my motive. I know my inner thinking and reasons and motivation behind why I do something.
I meant well.
And whatever, yeah. But when we see somebody else, because I can't read your mind and know your heart, all I see is your actions and hear your words. And so I judge you on those things.
And immediately put up a wall between us if you do something or say something that hurts or offends me. And you're behind the wall there, and I am not going to feel any compassion towards you.
And this is why the Bible says God sees us differently than we see each other. We look on the outside, but he looks at our heart. And this is why we cannot be righteous judges, because we can't see each other's heart. Okay? Only he can do that. And so he knows the inner motivations. He knows the inner thoughts and feelings and reasons. And so thus he can judge appropriately, whereas all we see are the behaviors.
Yeah, I mean, think about this. Imagine I told you a story of a man who was married and he saw a woman that he thought was really beautiful, and she was also married, but he was a powerful, rich man, and so he was able to have her brought to him where he took advantage of her sexually, and then because he didn't want anyone to find out about it, he made sure that his colleagues ensured her husband was killed so that he could then marry her. We would probably immediately go baddie. He's in the baddie box. That's a bad guy. He's a really evil guy. But God says that he was a man after God's own heart. So we really can't be the righteous judge, because we would have judged him as a bad guy. But he isn't just that one action. Yes, he made a mistake, he sinned, he did the wrong thing, but that's not the summation of his entire life. And I'm talking about David here. It's not the summation of his whole life, and it's not the state of his heart.
Yeah, and we all have those bad moments. If we were honest and had to open up our skeleton closet, we all have those moments and days where we have made really bad choices, but we are not bad people per se. I mean, I have ministered to people that have done incredibly bad things, but at the same time, if you didn't know their secrets, you would think they're the nicest person in the world. I think there's goodness in all of us. There's badness in all of us.
There's capacity for both.
There is. So in Matthew 18, process, we go one-on-one. That keeps it isolated. It keeps it private. It's only those involved that have to talk. Well, if the person doesn't listen, which is often the case, there's a step 2. Step 2 is you take someone back with you. So now you have a witness. This becomes hard because then I think people might feel a little ganged up on.
Yeah.
But I think if you can bring someone as a witness to say, this person's standing with both of us here, but as a witness of there has been an offense that's occurred and I want to make it right.
And we're not ganging up, but we, out of love for you, out of love for the church, this is what's happening and this is what we need to address.
And we're bringing a little pressure to you to see that something needs to change, something needs to happen with the situation. So this is why I think a third party is involved. Now, if the person's still unrepentant, then it comes before the church. Okay, this is where it starts to get big and it starts to come before a larger group, and the issue becomes more public.
And this is really hard because, as we say, a lot of times these are the people you're doing life with. These are the people you love. These are your friends, your church family. Then
step 4, if the person's still unrepentant, they're supposed to be put out of the church. Basically, there's an exclusion that happens. Like we see that in the Catholic Church where they excommunicate someone.
Yeah. And I believe that that's not a punishment message. I believe that's about protecting the people within the church from further harm or hurt. Because if you get to that point, then it's probably something fairly grievous that's going on. We've witnessed this in church situations where the church doesn't deal with the conflict early enough, and the person just continues to hurt and harm and offend and upset and cause division within the church because it's not being dealt with and they're not being asked to leave when they really should have.
Yeah. And so I think there's a danger of being over compassionate, of being too tolerant and trying and trying and trying. I think we do need to follow some of these steps, and sometimes discipline is the right measure.
Yeah. We're called to love one another, but love has boundaries. And in order to love your church family well, you need to also make sure that they're protected from harm. If that harm is obvious and is happening repeatedly, we're to love the person as well, and we don't have to judge them or be harsh with them, but we also need to protect and love the people within our church community.
Yeah, I think obviously it depends on the offense, but if someone is in a leadership position or they're just part of the church and really just causing a stir, really causing issue, I think we have to deal with those things. And nobody likes conflict.
No.
Nobody likes conflict.
Yeah.
But you have to face that, and you have to do it with integrity. You have to do it with love. And sometimes there is a discipline that needs to come, and it may mean it's time for you to leave the church.
I think that in this current age, in this culture, there's a tendency to be overly compassionate to the point where we welcome and love and accept people of all persuasions types, no matter what they do, no matter what their actions are. We're just going to keep being compassionate and kind to them and accept them. But that's not actually loving to the people around you who they're harming. And so there's this fine line to walk, and you need to be able to use wisdom. Ask God for wisdom. We want to love the person that is causing the harm as well, but love has boundaries. And so we need to be able to, we do this with our kids all the time. We love our kids, but we have boundaries because we're trying to train them how to be a person of integrity and a person who has patience and a person who works hard and has a good ethic and all those sorts of things. We have to put boundaries in place for that, for them to learn. And also we need to have boundaries in place so that they don't harm themselves and others around them. And that's the same in church. We have to have boundaries. We have to be able to love each other well while also protecting the church community from harm.
Yeah, it's more than just about the individual. And I think that's something that we often forget, that it's more than just the people involved, that there are these extra people around that can get smeared, that can get hurt, that can be damaged by what's going on. And we have to think of the greater good is probably how I would put it.
And it's hard when you're, as I say, you're part of a church family. Maybe you've been friends for decades. And we've seen this happen where you're friends for decades, you've known them a really long time, and it's really hard when you see them causing division and hurt and discord and offense throughout your church. And people tend to feel a bit unempowered to do anything about it. But it's really important to deal with those things before they cause your church. Like, there's so many churches, it happens all the time. Every day, church splits. People leave en masse because the one causing the conflict is not dealt with and just brings so much harm to everyone there.
Yeah, and then, look, I know we've jumped around a bit. We've kind of gone from someone calling me a name and hurting my feelings to church split, but these things do escalate, particularly when there's murmurs and gossip and criticism and those types of things going on. If they're not dealt with early on, they do grow into these kinds of conflicts, these great big hurtful things that can impact actually generations.
If you don't deal with unforgiveness and wounding and offense when it happens, it festers, and then it might cause more and more and more, and to the point where you've got bitterness and bitter root judgments and hard hearts and people turning away from God. I mean, it just keeps escalating and going on and on and on. And we've seen it. It happens all the time.
Well, I grew up with a friend in high school, and her family had an issue with the church and ended up leaving church. And so then, like, her parents didn't go to church anymore. She basically grew up an agnostic, probably atheist at this point, and the generations now kind of continue because of one offense back, who knows, 50, 60 years ago, there was some offense. And
that wasn't dealt with.
That was not dealt with, and it's impacted generations of this family from knowing God and being Christians.
So if you're part of a church and you know that someone in that church has been hurt or offended, it's really important to reach out to them and talk to them about it and pray through that with them. If it's someone if they've been hurt by someone who's going around and hurting a whole bunch of other people, it might be time to intervene with that person and have a talk to them and pray with them. But we have to address these things.
We definitely do. And if you don't feel capable of addressing it yourself, get the pastor involved. Get somebody who is skilled at this to be involved and let them know this is being said and this is the movement that's growing underneath, We deal with that kind of thing very often. And so I just think it's best to get it early. That's why that process is there in Matthew 18. Go one-on-one. Resolve it between yourselves so that it doesn't slime, to use Ghostbuster language, doesn't slime other people.
Yeah.
You don't want to get hit with the slime of somebody else's problems because it just drags you into it and it becomes unnecessary, and the collateral damage can just be absolutely huge.
And remember, if you are going to address this, you're not ganging up on the person. They are not the baddie. This is another person who's part of your church family. We should approach with love, but with boundaries.
Yeah. So 2 things to remember from this. 1, if we have hurt somebody else, we need to acknowledge that, be humble, and seek forgiveness. I think that's a hard thing to do, to admit wrong. We have kids and you can see them, catch them red-handed, and sometimes they'll go, that wasn't me. It's like, who dropped the ice block wrapper on the floor and they're licking an ice block? Wasn't me. You're the only one eating an ice block.
We always end up saying it must have been the dog.
Yeah, our poor dog gets blamed for so much around here. I'm impressed with her, actually, and she's amazing, the things that she can do.
She did actually eat an Easter egg, so that was her.
she is naughty on chocolate. Oh, my goodness. But admitting wrong is a hard thing for any of us because we just don't like to admit when we're wrong. But as a Christian, if our motivation, we talk about this so much, if our motivation is love and unity and relationship, then we have to humble ourselves and go, yeah, I did the wrong thing. I'm sorry. Please forgive me. And then 2, if we're on the offended side, we've got to be willing to forgive as well. So yes, they hurt you. They did the wrong thing. it caused a consequence in your life, some sort of pain, some sort of hurt, embarrassment, whatever it may be, we've got to be willing to forgive and not vilify that person and use ungodly judgment to demean their character and slander them. It's not our job to go and find a group of people to agree with us about the topic.
Yeah.
It really needs to be done as privately as possible. That's the loving thing.
Yeah. And sometimes it's not possible for it to be private, but we should still continue in that vein of love and honoring. But, that doesn't mean we let people just walk all over us and cause division and cause offense and continue to just rampage through the church.
Well, I think that's why that sort of warning and encouragement in Matthew 5 that you read of saying, while you're on the way to court, before everybody hears your dirty laundry, work it out between yourselves.
Exactly.
Now, it might go in your favor, it might not. And if it doesn't, you're the one to blame.
And we know from our inner healing ministry work that we do, when you get a bitter root judgment against somebody, it grows and it becomes insidious in your life. You don't want that. So if you're struggling to forgive someone, just listen to what we're saying. That will harm you more than them. It is hard to forgive sometimes because it feels like you're letting down your defenses. But what we're saying is if you don't forgive, it is actually you that will be harmed long term because it will cause a bitterness in your life. It will cause judgment to take over, and eventually it will impact your faith because we've seen it happen so many times.
Yeah. Look, the offender is not sitting around thinking about what they did wrong. The same way that the offended person sits around and deals with the aftermath because they're the one that's hurting. They're the one that's in pain. So it's a little more at the front of their mind. And the best way to deal with it is to forgive that other person. Like I've always said, a lot of times people see that as letting people off the hook, like going, well, we're just going to let them get away with that. They're not even sorry about it. I can't forgive them. No, it's actually taking them off of your hook and putting them on God's hook.
And there will still be consequences.
He's the righteous judge. We talked about judgment before. He's the one who can actually bring justice. We can't actually do anything with it.
Yeah. I mean, if it's a situation where there needs to be some sort of consequence in place, that can still happen when you forgive. You don't have to give up on consequences. Forgiving doesn't say, oh, I now have to be in relationship with this person. No, you don't have to be in relationship with them. You can still have strong boundaries. They can still suffer consequences, but you're forgiving and letting go of that and handing the judgment to God because he is the righteous judge.
Thank you for joining us once again on the Kingfisher podcast. If you've enjoyed today's podcast, would you please give us a like, subscribe? We've seen a few comments lately. We really appreciate those, and we'll be responding to those shortly. And if you think there's someone who might need to have a listen to today, share it with them. Share it with them and encourage them, and hopefully they will find encouragement and love and peace through the things that they're hearing. This has been the Kingfisher Podcast with Eric and Bron Whitley. Have a blessed day.